to the Superhome tour for 2022. This is probably my favourite house, definitely my favourite house on the tour. So, but there are, you'll have your booklet now, but there's a number of really interesting homes, and I'm just going to introduce you to this house and some of the key points, and then I might also talk a little bit about some of the other houses that are on the tour, and really the reason why we're doing the Superhome movement too, which is really important. So, and you can read about that in here. So there's a very sort of succinct overview of the sort of backstory of why we created the Superhome movement. Probably a lot of people have heard my story, but my family were ejected from our home after the earthquakes, and got to experience the substandard rental accommodation in Christchurch, and we sort of come to realise that that's not okay, and that's how half the population's living, and we thought we need to do something about that, and that's why we started the Superhome movement. So our children actually got sick, and one developed asthma. They were very young at the time, and it sort of really was an unwanted experiment, seeing how the home affects health. So that's been a priority for us since, and probably before that too. You know, we've been sort of beating the drum of sustainability and energy efficiency for a couple of decades or more now, and it's just sort of starting to become top of mind for some people, with climate change being a big part of it as well. So this is a home which John and Vicky came to us. John is one of the owners, and I was really thrilled when they said they liked the Los Angeles house, a house called Los Angeles House, which is in Fendleton Road, which is a 1909 bungalow, and it's sort of Californian bungalow style. And I'd driven past that house as a young kid and thought, wow, that's cool, there's something mysterious about that, and that's probably what sort of my first experience of getting interested in architecture, and I thought there's something different about that. Reportedly it's haunted, but I'm not sure about that. But so this house takes some aesthetic cues from that in terms of the exterior materials and look, and with the big veranda, which is also quite common in Japanese houses. It's called an ingawa, having this veranda that wraps around the house. And then the interior is quite different. The interior is light and bright, whereas the Los Angeles house is very dark, timber paneling, and that's the way that's houses of that era were. But so just the first thing when you come to this house, you get that feel and the vibe of the place, and you think, well, this could have been designed or built whenever, it could have been 20 years ago, it could have been 50 years ago, and it's that timelessness that I think is a good quality in architecture, instead of having something that's sort of trendy for the day. So when you enter, you've got this sort of lovely door, and the what's called a ranma, which welcomes you. There's another one over here, which has come from Japan. When John and Vicky, they do a lot of travelling, they pick that up. And then you've got this feeling of opening out to this space here, this sort of compression and release, and it sort of creates a bit of drama in this entry hall, which we call the library, and then that just allows the light into the house, and there's no passageway, you just progress from one space to the other, which is another sort of Japanese concept. Just doors that open from one space to the next, and it's spatially efficient, and it just seems to work. So the idea of how the house sits on the site, we've really sort of tried to bring the landscape in. So we've got lovely existing trees, which was a bonus. So, you know, this is a beautiful tree here, it's framed by the window, there's the cherry blossom and nice garden. So it's sort of thinking about the views and the light and how the house relates to the site, which a lot of the time I think people miss that. Or I think design, sadly, is marginalised quite heavily in New Zealand. You know, people just think, okay, we'll go straight to a building company. They miss out on, or they sort of don't know what they don't know. They miss out on the design part of it, but also innovation. So if we're just repeating things of the past, the technical details are not going through this process of continual improvement, which is what we're all about. We're always trying to make homes, you know, the next home better and learn something on each job that we do. So this house, other than the aesthetics and the look and feel of the home, it's really as good as it gets in terms of the technical performance, the thermal performance and energy efficiency. So it's 0.6 air changes, which people in the business will know that's the German standard for a passive house. So we try and make houses airtight. The eco panel is a model of it just below the sign there. Is a really good way to do a prefabricated airtight thermally efficient wall, and Dan's going to do a talk later about the eco panel. One of the key points of that is you've got this airtight insulated cavity, and then you've got a separate cavity for your services, for your plumbing and electrical. So you're not poking holes through your insulation layer. Everywhere you've got a socket or a switch, which is a key point where cold air can come through in a normal wall construction. So that's a key thing, and it's something that's missing from New Zealand homes. It's not part of the building code. Other countries, airtightness is a requirement. Ventilation is required. If you're going to have an airtight home, you've also got to have a ventilation system. So those two go together, and this house has a whole home ventilation system, and Marcus from Moisture Master is here, so if you want to know more about how that works, every space has pretty much has ventilation, and it's heat recovery ventilation, so we're extracting the stale warm air and transferring that warmth into the fresh cooler air that's coming in, so that's really, really efficient. And that's just working continuously. So those are probably some of the key points. And actually, if you look in this guide near the front, there's actually a list of the top 10 points. You know, what are the top 10 key principles that make a super home? You know, the design. Obviously, you know, there's more about a super home than just the energy efficiency and thermal efficiency. The design, function, the flow, and I talked a little bit about that. And so, you know, there's a bunch of standards out there, but they're more technical standards. They're not really related to good design. So that's one thing that we're really thinking about. And we're really thinking about, rather than having a sort of certification or accreditation, it's just really important, the key attributes of the home, rather than sort of chasing points with rating systems and things. So, but one thing that some of these rating tools do, which I think is essential, is modelling. So we energy model all of the designs that we do. A lot of the time we're just sort of confirming what we already know, but for the industry, that's, I think, a really good direction to go, because you know, basically you know how much heat loss you've got, how much your power bill is going to be, or you know what sort of heating system you might need, those sort of things, if you do an energy modelling exercise. So that's one thing that I think will become a requirement in the future. Whether that's in 10 years' time, I'm not sure, because we're probably about 2 decades behind the rest of the world in terms of our technical standards here in New Zealand. So that's a key thing, and a big part of it, Kaufman Windows here is here. Andrew and Chris, you can talk to them and about these beautiful windows. So the windows, it's probably around half the heat loss, if not more. So if you can get good windows and do as good as you can with the windows, that's going to make a big difference, because that's where more than half your heat's going. New Zealand, once again, particularly crappy windows. They're aluminium. The rest of the world looks at aluminium as a really poor performing product, because it's probably the 5th most conductive material known to man. You know, it's a really good conductor. It's not what you want to use as your window frames. Thankfully, they've finally improved the building code, so thermally broken aluminium windows are required, and they've doubled the insulation value, but also missing from the code is the correct detail for how they're installed. So in this house, the windows are recessed in line with the insulation. So I pretty much say, if you're going to spend more money on better windows, you're wasting your time to a degree, unless you get them installed properly in the warm part of the wall, because you could spend more money on thermally broken aluminium windows, and if you build them according to the building code, they're still in a cold cladding cavity overlapping the cladding, which the rest of the world looks at that and thinks, my God, you're bonkers, why are you doing that? But New Zealand, we don't know what we don't know, so that's a key thing. So, you know, I'm probably getting into a few little technical details here, but I think the important thing is talk to the right people. You can talk to Dan Saunders, the builder, and he's done a marvellous job of building this house, so well done, Dan. And you can talk to Andrew and Chris about the windows, and talk to them about the details, but the key thing is get the right team. If you do your research, that's important, but also make sure that you're talking to the right people, because sometimes you get the wrong information. Sadly, a lot of the time you get the wrong information in terms of the New Zealand building industry. So that's important. Get the right team. I'm biased, but I'd say it starts with a really good designer. So, because everything else that follows, they're following the ideas and the drawings. So that's important. But it does take a team effort, and the best projects we work on, we have a really engaged team, instead of sort of builders and architects and designers sort of locking horns. We're all on the same journey together, and even talking from a very early stage about how we're going to build the house and those sort of things. So I just got to say thank you to John and Vicky. It's been a real pleasure to be involved in this project, and it was inspiring to meet you guys and share the same sort of vision and values, and there's a lot of creative input come from the clients as well in terms of how this house has come out, which has been wonderful. So that's the other part of the team, you know, it's just everybody sharing ideas and working together. So in terms of, you'll hear more about the details of this house if you talk to the others that have been involved in the project, but in terms of the other homes on the tour, you've got your tour guide book here. Yeah, it's probably too small to see this, but if you go to page 22, there's a little house which is a very spatially efficient, compact home. It's also designed and built to passive house standards in Prebbleton, and the owners named that Whare Paetara, which is wall house, and it's got this big wall that goes through the middle of it, which was really the big idea. I think every house needs a big idea, and this house, I think it was this space here was the big idea, and the inspiration from the Los Angeles house. But this house here, the big idea was having this wall that goes through the middle, so that we could effectively have a split roof and have some high level glazing and cross ventilation. But that wall also houses all of the plant, the ventilation and systems, hot water cylinder, all that sort of stuff, and some storage. So that's that one, and I'll be doing a talk there at 1 o'clock, but I'll also try and get the owners to talk, because the owner, it's interesting, he's a registered nurse, and he's obviously very knowledgeable about health, family health and children's health, and is fully aware of how our homes affect health outcomes. So he's a very interesting chap to talk to, and he'll be there at the home. Paul and his wife Shirley, I'm not sure